Hi, guys. So, I'm feeling a little like off the cusp, if you will, and something that's been rolling through my mind for the past few days, maybe even past couple weeks, has just been this thought around, we're about to head into 2026, and we're seeing the world sort of at its global level of what's occurring. And I think we can all agree that the world is kind of just on fire right now. It's not great. It's not ideal. No one's really winning and like doing well right now in some ways. And as I sit in that reality and I sit in my own reality of like, what's alive for me? Like, what's showing up for me? What am I being like called to, if you will? I really just keep coming back to, I feel like everybody needs intimacy work in 2026. And the reason I keep coming back to that is because when I look at everything that's occurring, yes, there are systems that are built on certain belief systems that do not serve and harm and hurt people. That's totally true. They need to be dismantled. And something I've always said about that is that, you know, you've got to dismantle the systems, but at the foundation, you have to understand your biases and you have to dismantle those first, because otherwise, somewhere down the line, the system of inequality will be rebuilt. What I see more foundationally, and what I even feel in my body as I look out into the world, as I see people on the daily basis, as I even hear like what clients tell me, what people tell me in a workshop, what random strangers come up to me and tell me about their lives, and always so happenstance, it's always about their relationships and their intimacy and their sex. There has never been a time, I think, that there has been such a deep level of disconnection and isolation and loneliness. And of course, we go through seasons. There innately will always be these experiences. And even if you're in relationship, even if you're in an incredible relationship of any kind, partnership, friendship, lovership, family, whatever, you will still have moments of this. There is no way to erase that experience, and that is not the goal. It is more so the knowing that there is such a deep level of isolation and disconnection and loneliness. I feel like I keep hearing more and more from people of how there is just this like hunger and this yearning for community. That there's actually this deeper desire to know our partners. And as we feel into these and we feel the pain of not having that, we move into a state of helplessness because we're like, I feel this. This feels true. And I literally have no fucking idea. And you kind of maybe go back into your past and you think about your family and your parents and whomever that you've seen in your life. And you're like, actually, like, they didn't really have it that great. Or like what they had is just not what I envisioned for myself. And I literally do not know how to do this. And there's a helplessness in that. And I get that feeling deeply. I have always said from like very beginning, it's like one of my classic tales of myself. Like, I remember being 4 and just like witnessing a parallel of experiences happening around me and just having this clear feeling as I could see everything that had happened behind me, like before me, and everything that could happen through me if I do not do something different. I was like, I ain't doing this anymore. Like, this all ends with me and I'm going to do this differently. And in knowing that I was always going to do things differently, there's always been this degree of helplessness of like, I actually don't know what or like how sometimes. So I just want to say, like, I see you and I feel you in that. And I think it's important to know that like we all are feeling that. And it's because we really have been on some level, on multiple levels, been like disempowered from not knowing, not having the skills, not having the capacity to truly connect with people, to truly feel close to people, to really know how to harness intimacy, both from like a sexual and a relational standpoint. And I come back to this idea so often that really like the quality of our life is the quality of our relationships. And we have been disempowered through individualism, through all kinds of components of systematic things. And we just like haven't actually developed this skill, because relationships, intimacy, even great sex, it doesn't just happen. Yes, of course, there's kind of like these fleeting things or just like this happenstance. And it's like, oh, whoa, wasn't expecting that one. But it's like, if you want to consistently experience it, There's skills that you need, and you need to practice those skills. And those skills really need to become your way of being, your sense of lifestyle, even. And so I just like keep internally coming back to myself, and I'm like, this world is like hungry for this, for intimacy work. It really is. Like, that's the calling I hear. And then we may be like time away from fully being in that realization and in that remembrance. But I think I say this all to maybe be some sort of resonance of like, if you're experiencing this, if this feels true to you, you're not the only one. And the fact that you're not the only one asking these types of questions of like, where are the people? How do we do this? I want something different. How do I do it? It means that we're all kind of collectively feeling into the same energy, and we all play a part in like helping it come back. I really think about when we used to live in tribal communities, and there was like such a natural understanding about relationship and such an intuitive nature to it. And we've lost touch with that. And so we really have to like come back to it. And when I think about intimacy work too, because it's not like it doesn't exist out there. It does. But what I find different about how I think about it is that, one, it is foundationally built on the relationship that you have with yourself. And that is not a way to put more pressure or more weight onto you as an individual. And let me just say, like, if you're like, oh, like, why the fuck do I have to do that? Like, I feel you. And like the capacity to have different sorts of intimate experiences with people of all kinds of relationships really starts with the capacity to be intimate with ourselves. And so much of our society has taught us to run away from ourselves and to look for something outside of ourselves to make us forget, to make us feel what we need to feel, to meet our needs. And there's so much actual disempowerment in that. You have so much more power inside of you than you realize. You have so much more capacity. And even when you work with like, I'm building a relationship to myself, I'm meeting myself, I'm meeting my needs, etc. It's not from a place of like, and I have to do it all by myself, and no one will ever help me, and no one will ever meet me, and blah, 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 blah. All those stories. It's like, can you fill your cup up halfway? Can you meet yourself? Can you meet those parts of you that you're terrified of, that you don't want to be with? Can you meet even just half of your needs? Can you fill part of your own cup up? Because when we're coming from that sort of place of honest, like abundance, like if you think about our society today, like if everyone had at least half of their cup filled up, like we would be in abundance of like resource in a way. But you have more receptiveness to just being like, actually, like if this person can't meet me in X, Y, and Z way, or if this is where they need to be right now, and it doesn't align with how I want things to be, that's okay. They're a human, I'm a human. We're trying to figure this shit out. We're in different seasons. Life happens. And this doesn't excuse like toxic, bad, abusive behavior or anything. And everyone has their own discernment of like, what do you have tolerance for and what do you need to be a no to and a non-negotiable and all those things. But it's like when you have that relationship to yourself, you know yourself better. Your cup is half filled. And actually, you can practice the skills that are needed in any other type of relationship with yourself because you within yourself are your own sort of system. You have your own relationships going on inside of you. And so like when we think about something like repair, for example, so much of the time it's like, oh, like I'm single and I can't even practice repair because there's no conflict and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, I want a partner. I want to be able to do that. And I've said this a million times. And so like, I feel you. And I've sat at different points and been like, wow, my little Ashley has been screaming her head off and I've literally ignored her. No wonder when I go towards her and I finally acknowledge I've been ignoring her, that she moves a little bit, that she's a little afraid, that she doesn't trust because she's like, you left me again. So how do I repair with that part of myself? How can I practice that skill there? And notice the times I'm doing it with other parts of myself. How am I really like communicating between my parts? How am I meeting the needs of my parts, etc.? There's so much we can learn about relationship by being in relationship to ourselves. And we expand our capacity for intimacy. We start to develop the skills that we need, and we really start to know ourselves and be in a security within ourselves, an anchorment in ourselves of like, hey, like no matter what happens, I've got me, and I know that I'll be okay, even if it's hard or even if it's painful. And that's a very different stance to walk into relating with than, I need this from you. I need you to show this way. Or like, ugh, like get away from me, like, ugh. You know, that's very different. I think another like piece about intimacy work that this will always be one of the hills I die on in a way, but there's such a large amount of collective trauma in the relational and sexual fields of just the world itself, let alone where we might fall into that individually. And it's harmful to not have spaces where you're doing intimacy work that are trauma informed, or even to the depths of like doing and being trained in trauma healing. As someone who's experienced sexual and relational trauma, I have been in spaces where that's not been held as a truth, and I have been harmed by that. And I think we actually have to acknowledge more of the nuance here of like how challenging it is to be stepping into learning these new skills, and how quickly our trauma can come online, and how quickly we can get out of our own sense of center and resource. And we have to have harnessing kind of both sides of this and like working with the dance between them. When you've gone through that, that's the only way to do it. And it looks like it takes forever, and it feels like one little step takes so much energy and time, but it's really the only way. And it's because we have such a large amount of like that sort of trauma in the field. And part of intimacy, like the magic and the power of it, is that, you know, part of like this idea around trauma is that it's taking something away from you. It's like disempowering you. It's making you small. It's making you shrink. And it's like, actually, the way that I heal my trauma isn't by fully getting rid of it, because I don't know if that's actually possible. We'll have to see where I end up in this lifetime. But it's actually being like, I like feel this trauma. I have every reason to be defensive, to be protective, to close my heart, to never go towards another person. I have all the reasons. And if I play into that, that means my trauma wins. Even if I'm like healing and working through my trauma. And so the question I've asked myself, and I think this is like this piece of intimacy, is like, how do I hold my trauma and not let it define my life? How do I hold that I've been hurt in these ways and still open when it feels safe and right? How do I develop the skills to do that? How do I step into spaces where I know that I'll get triggered, but I do it because I want to claim my life and I want to make it for myself? And I think intimacy work, especially when you've experienced that kind of trauma, and again, I think on some collective level, because of how disconnected we all kind of have. And so in that way, the defiance is that I'm going to be terrified of doing this thing, and I'm going to lean into it. And I'm going to do it in a way that is like holding me in my resource and holding me in tolerance. And I'm going to have the skills to bring myself back to resource, to be in my tolerance. And I'm also going to flirt with my edge at times, because the only way I can grow, the only way I can truly come back to myself is being willing to like go into the fire of like something that triggers you, and to harness this skill and to learn this skill and to just see what happens when you're kind of dancing between the two. And to do that sort of healing is not easy by any means. And you really do need spaces that can hold the complexity of both the trauma healing and resolution, and also the learning of intimacy skills, the invitation to take risk, the invitation to do something different, something new, something that feels more true, and to even know what that truth is within you. And the last piece that I would say about intimacy work is that it focuses a lot on partnership. And I have a resonance with that in this way of like, I deeply think partnership is beautiful. And it's a huge catalyst for our growth as humans, as spiritual beings, etc. And it's often a bigger catalyst because it tends to hold more of our triggers. And we don't just want to only have this like beautiful relationship with ourselves and only have this incredible partnership that we can cultivate over time. But it's like, how do we shift the culture of how we exist in other relationships? How do we build a family culture around a sacredness of how we relate? How do we build communities that practice and heal together, that celebrate liberation and expression? And also, there's different dynamics there. There's a very different dynamic when you're working one-on-one with your partner with something versus when you're sharing it with your kids. There's developmental considerations. There's capacity. There's, what they need even. Like, what do I know that I can share with them? And how do I help them along the way? And in community, there's just so many dynamics to that because there's so many different people, so many different kinds of relationships and connections, agreements, etc. And so it's really about like, again, like how do we anchor it in ourselves? And we practice it with one person, and it doesn't have to be a partner by any means. It can be anybody. But sometimes that partnership is like a very unique container that you can really harness and really kind of like juice the skills that you need and really juice the triggers that you can work through. But then how do we translate that to these other systems of relationships, of other systems of relating? And so I've known this for like a bit of time, but I've always had the, speculation of like, maybe this is just one of my random thoughts that's passing through and like just it's a thing that runs through Ashley's mind. And I think, doing live workshops since April of this year and that being the start of my business after going through my year-long certification and just hearing what people reflect to me, hearing what people share with me, seeing what my clients are experiencing, their transformations, etc. Like I'm just more convinced than ever that like intimacy work is really the foundation of what we all need. And there's a notion in the world right now of like building the new earth and like rebuilding the earth. And I think if it isn't built with the foundation of like intimacy as like a like core value almost, I don't know that it's really going to be the new earth that we need. I think the transformation of everything else that needs to be transformed can only happen when we reclaim intimacy, relating, as the foundation of how we move through the world. And so that's just what I'm thinking about. And in that, I think my invitation to you all is to consider like, is that true to you? Does any of this resonate? And what parts of it do and what parts don't? And when you really sit in the reflection of that, especially as we go into like a winter season, like take inventory, like where are your relationships right now of all kind? Where is the level of intimacy, the level of connection? How do you feel from a sexual standpoint versus a relational standpoint? Do you feel met? What do you need more of? What do you need less of? And for whatever you need more of, do you know how to ask for that? How to give that to yourself even? Do you know how to receive that? Maybe even like what can you clearly identify or like, this is the wall that I hold up around people, even to some degree the people I deeply love and feel safe with. And if you kind of reflect on where the state of your relationships are, like starting to sit in the idea of like, what could you really do in 2026? Like one thing, if you could address it, one step you could take that could even just shift the needle slightly. shift it in a glimmer, just a glimmer of a shift. What would that be? And when you think about maybe the clarity of that action, if you will, what support do you need? Do you need other people doing it? Do you need someone to support you and hold space for you? Do you need to learn something? Maybe it's a combination of all of these. And don't feel like you have to rush to know any of those answers. These are questions to kind of like plant and let simmer. But what I will say is that if any of this is resonant to you, and even thinking to yourself, okay, I want to work on this one thing, or I need to learn this skill, or I really need to find community that's invested in this just as much as I am. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for what I continue to offer and release in 2026 through the Sacred Intimacy Temple. Because what I've sort of alluded to is like one of the big sort of visions I have. And again, we're just beginning. There's a lot more to build and to create. And I'm just grateful that you're here to be part of this, because there's a reason that we know each other. There's a reason we're connected. And I feel very much as though we're part of each other's journeys. And there's a way that we can work together and to ultimately create more connection and closeness in our lives in the ways that we yearn for. So thank you for watching this, and I'm sending you so much love. And also, just to say, I'm grateful that you're here. I'm grateful that you've given me the opportunity to hold space for you. It's my deepest honor.